Good evening and welcome to On the Frontline Care and Relief. I'm Luz Chavez Gonzalez with United We Dream. This mass call is a space to hear updates and analysis, engage in political education, and get involved in meaningful action. We're so glad you're here with us tonight, and we'll get started in just a minute. Spanish interpretation is provided on this call. If you wish to hear the Spanish interpretation, please select the globe icon on your computer or the more on the three dots icon on your tablet or smartphone. Select language interpretation and choose Spanish in the pop-up. Buenas noches y bienvenida al encuentro virtual de Frontline. Soy Luz Chavez González con United We Dream. Este encuentro virtual es un espacio para escuchar información y análisis, participar en la educación política y tomar acción. Hay interpretación en español. Si deseas escuchar la interpretación en español, por favor selecciona el icónico del globo en la computadora o donde dice More o los tres puntitos en su tableta o teléfono inteligente. Seleccioné interpretación de idiomas y después español del menú que aparece. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany Flowers from the Frontline, who will be leading our call tonight.
And thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tiffany Flowers. I'm the campaign director of the Frontline. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am coming live to you straight from Baltimore, Maryland. Welcome to On the Front Live for Care and Relief. We're so glad you could join us again. And if you're watching on Zoom, please tell us in the chat where you're from. Say hi. What are your pronouns? Introduce yourselves. So this is our first Frontline mass call since Trump left office. The Senate is gearing up for an impeachment trial to hold him accountable for inciting a white supremacist attempted coup on January 6th. Many of us are still breathing a sigh of relief that he's gone and celebrating that we changed the balance of power in this country against all odds. Movement did that, and we did that. But even with our multiple victories, we're still confronting multiple crises: the devastating global pandemic, ongoing racial injustices, and economic devastation, all of which are interrelated and all of which hit our communities the hardest. I don't know about y'all, but every day is an emotional roller coaster for me. We're trying to manage our families, our resources, and keep our heads above water. Every day, I feel a deep sense of grief, but also joy, rage, but also hope. I know I'm not alone, and that's why I'm so happy to share this space with you tonight. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here rocking with the Frontline crew, and we appreciate you. So who is the Frontline? For our returning crew, welcome back. For all the newbies, I want to welcome you to the crew and take a minute to tell you about who we are. The Frontline is a collaboration of Movement for Black Lives, the Working Families Party, United We Dream, and the Rising Majority. Last spring and summer, we witnessed the largest social movement in U.S. history. Many of you took to the streets to defend Black lives. Many of you worked hard to move that energy into power-building strategies. Many of you have already taken action with the Frontline through our text team, election defenders. Who could ever forget Joy to the Polls or the voter engagement of our partner organizations? And for that, we definitely say thank you. If you haven't already joined us, please take a moment, get your phone out and text Frontline to 30403 so that we can stay connected. We've won so much by harnessing our collective power, y'all, and yet there's so much more that we need and deserve and will likely have to fight for. We all need and deserve swift care and relief. We will keep building our collective power to fight for a bold and progressive agenda in the actual Biden-Harris administration. We will continue walking together towards our freedom dreams, and we will continue to take care of each other as we have, and we will, because we keep us safe. So just want to run through the agenda real quick. We have a great and powerful agenda tonight. We are so lucky to be blessed with the presence of Reverend Callahan, and we're really in for a treat. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about care and relief, And then we're going to hear from some grassroots leaders and our folks at the People's Bailout about what the Biden's proposed COVID relief package does and what it doesn't include, and what we can be doing right now to demand care and relief for all of our people, because we know that's what we need. Now, little housekeeping here, because it's gonna happen maybe. Trolls, they like to enter our space, they like to be disruptive, they like to cause trouble and say ugly things, but it's only because they know we're winning. When we fight for justice and liberation, there's always going to be haters, and that's just on Mary Had a Little Lamb. The more visible our work is, the more they're going to come up after us. If it's upsetting to you, and I know it would be to anyone in the audience, just respond with a message of solidarity or love, or name your city, or name your cat. Do anything you want to do that keeps the nastiness out of the chat and centers the joy in the space that we're trying to create and making our plan on how to win. So with that, I am so pleased to introduce you to Reverend Dr. Leslie Callahan, the pastor of St. Paul's Baptist Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who will be grounding us. Reverend Callahan, thank you so much for joining. I'm so honored that you joined the front line tonight, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for your warm introduction and for the work that you do, um, that I certainly consider myself to be a part of. Good evening to everybody who is listening. How wonderful it is for us to be able to gather in this way and share together. I want to offer a reflection that's really about one of my favorite moments in Black history. I always consider the Black History Month experience to be an opportunity and a gift. I know that there are those who understandably lament the continued resistance and racism that keep us from seeing the achievements and the contributions and the humanity of Black people all year round. And I share that frustration. I know there are others who are still struggling or with the ways in which often the stories that are told still center a certain shade and class of Black man. Still, I love the month because it is an opportunity, 28 days, sometimes 29, for our souls to look back in wonder about how we got over. It's kind of like an anniversary or celebration of a birthday for me. One of my favorite moments in Black history includes two of the legendary luminaries of the Black experience in America, Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth. Frederick Douglass was a fiery abolitionist, an eloquent orator, best-selling author, once um, escaped from enslavement in Maryland. Sojourner Truth was an equally engaging but unlettered freedwoman born into slavery with the name Isabella Baumfree in what was then the slave state of New York. The scene was an anti slavery convention in Salem, Ohio. The year was 1852. The context was a time of deep discouragement and despair for anti slavery activists. Lots of organizing had gone into the anti slavery movement, and it was robust and interracial, and it was rallying and demonstrating, and had been doing so for a very long time. There was a growing corpus of pamphlets and slave narratives, an interracial speakers bureau that included orators with the eloquence of Douglass himself. And yet, slavery was on the move. The pro slavery cause was seeming to win. And with the Compromise of 1850, slavery expanded into new territories. Even worse, the Fugitive Slave Act, as a concession to the Southern slavocracy, made it unsafe, even in the North, for freed persons and those who had escaped slavery. Frederick Douglass was at the podium. He had the floor, and he was talking about all of the challenges of the moment. He was decrying the steps backwards that they had taken. Uh, I know everyone who does organizing work knows what it's like to feel the frustration and the concern when you feel like you've taken several steps forward and at least as many steps backwards. Frederick Douglass, in this space of despair and concern, was telling the story, speaking the truth of the moment, when from the back of the room, someone who did not at that moment have the floor, but certainly spoke her mind, Sojourner Truth piped up and she asked a question. But Frederick, she said, is God dead? This story is so meaningful to me for a number of reasons. The first of which is something that I hope is helpful for us on this call. That is the recognition that over the long haul, eventually, everybody needs reminders, encouragement, and grounding. Uh, all of us know the highs and lows, the moments when we're feeling like we all we do is win, 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 no matter what, and other moments when we feel like the cause of justice is in decline. And that's why we have one another. Neither Sojourner Truth nor Frederick Douglass was always in despair. Each of them had their moments of ups and downs, and the beauty is that they had one another and the community of activists and organizers of which they were a part. In this particular moment, it is Sojourner Truth who reminds Frederick Douglass to be hopeful. I'm sure there were others when it was the other way around. Everybody needs the reminder from time to time. Everybody needs encouragement. Sometimes what is before us, just the facts of the moment, are so discouraging that they might stymie us. They might keep us from being able to move forward. They might cause us to give up entirely. Now, the second thing I want to note is that the concept of God is not static. It was not static for Frederick Douglass nor for Sojourner Truth, and it isn't static for us. One doesn't have to see God the same way to find useful elements in the idea that there is something beyond what we can see. Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass, as a matter of fact, were both religious seekers. Their lives, their religious lives were fluid. They were constantly evolving. Sojourner Truth was especially prone to experimentation in terms of religious community. So when she says God, she doesn't have a narrow view of what that might mean. But what she is trying to remind Frederick Douglass is what I think sometimes I need reminding about too, which is that in order to do the kind of work we are doing, we need to be able to imagine beyond what is and actually hope for it. We have to be able to see beyond, think beyond, hope beyond, work towards something beyond what currently is. And sometimes that means we've got to believe in something that is greater than ourselves. There are hopeful signs in our moment, and there is also much in our moment that will test our resolve. It is likely that we will encounter some compromises over the next few months and years that make us feel like our cause is in decline. And in those moments, when you feel despair, remember you're not by yourself. Connect with folks like the Frontline. Ground yourself in the encouragement and in the wisdom that comes from within and also that comes from community and even something greater than us all. Know that your sense of what that greater is probably evolving, as is true for most of us. But also know that when we live in hope, we actually empower ourselves with the creativity and the imagination that is necessary for us to be able to do the work. I hope that in the days and weeks and months to come, you find in the stories of our ancestors, in the company of friends, and in the presence of God, everything you need to continue on the journey towards justice. God bless you.
Reverend Callahan, that was really wonderful. Thank you so very much. And I think what you just said is a really wonderful segue into the moment of reflection that we want to take on the front line, to just honor everybody's humanity and acknowledge all that we've been through and continue to go through, and acknowledge the fact that everybody's suffering: the children, the parents, the teachers, the workers, the unemployed, the elderly, the people who've experienced the loss of someone that they love because of COVID. I just want to say that I see you, I feel you, you're not alone. And I do really pray that swift care and relief finds you and all of us very soon, because we deserve it. But look at all that we've accomplished while surviving a once in a lifetime health crisis. In spite of our collective stress and struggle and fatigue, right? We've mobilized to beat back fascism and save our very bruised and delicate democracy. But even after our victories, there weren't hugs, there weren't victory parties, there wasn't a moment to breathe. We just haven't had any reprieve. We know what our families need. Relief comes in many forms, including actual material delivery of money and services to our people. We have to stick together and make sure that we get that for each other. Here at the Frontline, together with the Movement for Black Lives, the Working Families Party, and Rising Majority, we have a plan and we have a vision for these first 100 days. And we invite you to join us in this work, because it starts right now. So I want to get into some offerings that we have. The Frontline will be continuing on our training and political education track, and continue next week with Unity Requires Accountability. The Senate trial will be happening next week. I don't know how many of you saw or didn't see, but our former president has refused to come and testify. And we need to have a conversation about the lasting damage that he's done, and that how we cannot move forward unified without accountability for what has happened and is happening right now. On the week of the 17th, we're going to talk about housing and the economy. On the week of the 3rd, we're going to talk about immigration. And all along, we're going to be training up, just like we did with election defenders, just like we did on Joy to the Polls, on how to be ready for the congressional recess and the things that we can do to make sure we get what we need to have. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any of these opportunities, and you want to be down with the Frontline every step of the way, I'm going to ask you again, please take out your phone and text Frontline to 30403. So let's get a little technical right now. We got him out. I don't really want to say his name, but we'll say we got him out, and the Democrats control the Senate, and we should be straight now, right? We should be straight. We should be straight. But unfortunately, there is some big fights brewing. In terms of care and relief from the pandemic and the economic devastation so many of us are facing, this year, there will likely be 2 big federal fights. One will be about the COVID-19 relief bill. This includes the struggle around $2,000 stimulus checks, or stimmies, lovingly called stimmies, state and local aid, money for vaccines, and much, much more. Congress is moving around this and is trying to reach a deal on this as soon as possible, maybe even this month, but that doesn't mean that we take the pressure off, right? Right. We have folks in the People's Bailout with us today who will help us understand the relief package and what's at stake. But right after the relief bill is passed, there'll likely be another major fight around recovery. So what does that mean? It means things like investment in infrastructure and care jobs, clean energy, and economic justice. The debate around that recovery package will likely heat up in the spring and summer, and we are going to have to be and stay and remain in formation. Before I turn it over to Desiree, who's going to talk about what we can be doing right now, I just want to remind you of your pending invitations, because I threw out a lot. So tell me in the chat, you going to join the upcoming mass calls with us and learn more? Are you going to come to the training and pressure tactics to get ready to win? Practice pressure tactic training. Sorry, y'all, it's 8:20. Will you join us in our Friends at the Working Parties family later this month for the State of the Union response and some exciting announcements about the recess? Yeah? Yeah? Great. One more time, I hate to sound like a broken record, but maybe somebody just joined us. Maybe somebody just heard me say training and was like, how do I get down with this? You know how? Text Frontline to 30403. Join our campaign for care and relief. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Desiree Joy Frias, campaign director of the People's Bailout from her hometown, South Bronx, South Bronx. She fights for transformative relief from the COVID-19 crisis at the federal level. Desiree, thank you so much for joining us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Tiffany. And thank you both Tiffany and Reverend Callahan for that wonderful grounding. I think it's so important to recognize that we are going through something unprecedented. We're going through something so hard. Here because our ancestors fought, they persevered, and it's our turn to do the same. We need to challenge the hardships that we're facing right now into real transformative change. So my name is Desiree Joy Frias. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the campaign director for the People's Bailout. The People's Bailout is a partnership of over 1,000 signatory organizations, lawmakers, individuals like you that have been fighting since the start of the pandemic to make sure that the bills that are passed in the Congress center people, not profits. Our 5 principles are: first, health. That's vaccines, that's testing, and that's getting control of this pandemic. 2, economic relief directly to the people, making sure that we get not just one more stimulus check, but recurring cash payments of $2,000. 3, bailing out workers, not corporations. We know that the last 2 bills had a lot of money for big companies. And to be honest, companies like Amazon have made money throughout this pandemic, while a lot of us, people on the ground, are in debt. So 4, we need to invest in a green economy. That means investing in our infrastructure, public transit, and making sure that we set up a public health jobs corps, 100,000 jobs, to not only distribute these vaccines, but provide permanent health infrastructure in our communities. And 5, protect our democracy. Yes, we now have the presidency, the Senate, and Congress. However, we have to understand that that doesn't mean we can let our guard down or stop fighting for what we need, especially when we have white supremacists attacking our own democracy from inside. Our work here at the People's Bailout is anchored by the members of our core team. The Center for Popular Democracy, It Takes Roots, Movement for Black Lives, Care in Action, People's Action, Sierra Club, and Working Families Party. It's a big tent, y'all. You're all welcome. So under these 5 principles, we fight alongside our partner organizations for targeted asks from Congress to bail out the people, not corporations and billionaires. So right now we're asking for $2,000 monthly recurring cash payments, not just another $1,400 check. For public health coverage for all and forgiving any medical debt that people have from the CV-19 crisis. A pathway to citizenship for essential workers, for rent and student debt to be canceled, for a stop on all evictions, to extend and boost unemployment to $600 per week, and like I mentioned earlier, to form a public health job corps. This ambitious platform is the platform of a people's bailout, the demand that government deliver to us, the people, relief and recovery. Like Reverend Callahan mentioned before, we've gotten through hard times, but things have not been this hard in a long, long time. 40% of people in this country didn't have $400 in the bank before the pandemic. Now we have 16 million Americans that are behind on rent with an average of $8,000. If we just get one $1,400 check, that money's going to go straight to our landlords, to our credit cards. It's not going to provide any relief or purchase the everyday necessities that we need. Many of us have come together more than ever before, providing for each other in community the way we have for a really long time. Our faith-based communities, our mutual aid communities, our civic associations, however you organize with your neighbors. But these 10 long months of trauma have brought many of us to unprecedented hardship and stressed those community organizations to their limit. Evictions, utility shutoffs, medical bills. I see you. I know how hard this is. There's 72 million people who are not employed or not retired. Only 40 million of those are getting unemployment checks. The Biden administration has put forth a potential answer, a $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. Here's what's in it, but I do feel it could go further. First, the Biden administration is targeting the pandemic with a national vaccine program, increasing testing and tracing, providing paid sick leave to contain the spread of the virus, and to address race-based health disparities around vaccination rates and loss of life in communities of color. By aggressively targeting COVID, Biden seeks to open the majority of schools and businesses within the first 100 days. Neither of those two things can happen until we get this pandemic under control. The People's Bailout is asking the Biden administration to go further, to address the cultural and white supremacist roots of health disparities that we have in Black and Brown communities, as well as the barriers that they face to access medical care. Part of this problem is a lot of our communities don't have health infrastructure. We need to hire a public health jobs corps of 100,000 care workers to administer vaccines, conduct additional testing, and then to be dispatched for good into our communities to improve access to healthcare for everyone across the country. Now let's talk about cash. President Biden is proposing to send one more $1,400 check to match up with the $600 we got in December, if you got it, to make $2,000. This again is only going to go to people making less than $50,000 and for couples making less than $100,000. The American Rescue Plan also proposes expanding housing and SNAP benefits, expanded access to child care and affordable health care, increasing the federal minimum wage to $15, extending unemployment insurance, and to give an emergency boost to families and kids with childless workers. The problem is a lot of people have been excluded from both rounds of checks, especially families with mixed status. This is unacceptable. We need to give $2,000 recurring checks to everyone in the country, regardless of migrant status. And we need to make them recurring so that people across this country have something to rely on and something to start making change in their lives to get out of these financial holes that a lot of us are in, not from moral failings, not from anything we did, but from the government's inaction over the last 10 months in controlling this pandemic. For me and my neighbors here in the South Bronx, $1,400 is not going to cut it. With 20 million Americans behind on rent, we can't just get one more check. We need to move forward, and we need to get recurring checks to make real economic change so that we can actually rescue people and not just corporations. So on Wednesday, a budget bill passed in the House of the American Rescue Plan. Now that same bill has to be passed in the Senate. Once they're both passed, we go into something called reconciliation. It goes to the committees, like the Labor Committee or the Finance Committee, so that they can write the actual laws that match that budget. So that means we have a tight window. If the Senate passes their bill in the next week and it goes to committee, we need to target our elected officials before they write the legislation. We have a critical moment now to tell them what they should be writing down. Should that stimulus check say $1,400 one time, or should it say $2,000 going forward? Every time they mention a dollar that they're going to spend, that is our money. It's your money. It's my family's money. We paid in to our government so that they can take care of us when we're in need. There hasn't been a bigger time of need than now. We have to reject the Republicans' calls for fiscal austerity, and we have to say that you have to spend the money now, and you have to spend it on everyday people so that we can all get out of this together. So that means it's your turn to tell your story and demand that Congress pass a people's bailout. And tonight, I'm honored to welcome two powerful leaders from the front lines of this work to tell their stories of what care and relief looks like in their communities. First, we will hear from Simone Senogles, an organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network. Then you'll hear from Patricia Mendoza, an organizer with Alliance of Californians, for community empowerment. Simone Senogles is an Anishinaabe from the Red Lake Nation in northern Minnesota. She's a member of the leadership team at the Indigenous Environmental Network, where she has worked for the last 20 years. Her work is focused on Indigenous women's leadership and the importance of lifting up their work and their power. IEN is an Indigenous-led and operated environmental justice organization that works with Indigenous communities and nations in the United States and Canada. They fight for climate justice, sustainable communities, a just transition away from fossil fuel economy, and more. Simone, thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful to listen to. I found myself nodding and smiling the whole time that you were talking. So thank you so much for having me. I'm going to quickly introduce myself in my language. It won't take long. So Bonjour, Indinawe Maganag, Chinodanikwe Indigenikas, Misquagami Wizaga Iganing Indonjiba, Migzi Indudame. And so what I said was my clan, which is Eagle, my nation, which is the Red Lake Nation, and that I greet you relatives. And the reason that I wanted to start off with this introduction is to illustrate how important it is to us as Indigenous peoples and how ingrained it is in even the way that we introduce ourselves, that we are part of community, that we are always in relation to each other and to Mother Earth. That is the kind of the lifeblood of who we are, right? It's our strength. And I want to also greet you as relatives because, you know, we are not alone in this work and in this struggle. So as I was thinking about what I was going to say in this very important forum, it's very intimidating, right? And you look for, what am I going to say? How am I going to convey all the really important things that I want to say? And this morning when I woke up, one of the first things I did was scroll through social media. And I found this, and right away up on my screen popped this article from The Guardian. And it was titled, Indigenous Americans are dying at twice the rate from COVID as white Americans. And there was a picture on the front, and it was a picture of a funeral. And it was about a couple, a husband and a wife, who had both passed away from COVID, very near each other, very quickly. And it turns out that it was some very dear friends of my dad. And I was thinking about when that happened and that he was expressing his dismay to us, right? Because this man who had passed away, his dear friend, was not just a friend, but he was a contemporary. He was a person who shared values and understanding and experiences with my dad. And his loss was so deeply felt. And so not only was he a family person and a friend, but a lot of the people that we are losing in our communities are our elders, our wisdom keepers, our champions of causes, our teachers of the young, cornerstones of our community. Many of them are some of the last native language speakers. And we feel their loss very deeply. And we as Indigenous peoples, and many of the people who are watching, I know, we value our elders. And we push back against the narrative that we've been hearing in the media that, you know, our elders are expendable in COVID, that we can afford to lose a certain percentage of people, especially when they're older. Those are messages that we've been hearing, and we as Indigenous people stand strong against that, and we stand strong in our beliefs that our elders are valuable, they are precious to us. One of the things that was talked about in this article was some statistics. And it's strange, right? Because I almost never see natives in the graphs and charts that we see out in the news. And I'm just gonna write down the time so I don't go over. And you know, a lot of times we're just not represented in the data, and that's problematic because then people don't know what we're going through, and resources are not allocated to us. But sometimes when we do see the data, it's very troubling. And so, for example, in this article, it talked about the fact that 1 in 475 Native Americans are dying from COVID, as compared to 1 in 825 white Americans dying, and even 1 in 645 Black Americans dying from COVID. And I think one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is like, so we want to acknowledge that it's important that we're in the data, right? But we also don't want to be only measured by the data. And we have to think about why we're experiencing these kinds of disproportionate effects during COVID and before. And we know that we live in the legacy of genocide, colonization, and that we are, all of us, existing in an economy that values profit over people, that does not center life, an economy that gives everything to the fossil fuel industry, to corporations. And Indigenous peoples feel this very strongly. We pay for this, and we have paid for this with our lives, our lands, and our waters. So, as was mentioned, I work for an environmental justice organization, and that is the lens through which I view a lot of what we're going through. And so I'm thinking about some of the disproportionate impacts that are being felt by Indian country. And we've all been hearing about what's been going on the Navajo Nation. And you know, we're sometimes up to 40% of people living in the Navajo Nation don't have running water. It's really hard to wash your hands when you don't have water. And then we have to ask ourselves, why don't we have water? And again, it's that legacy of colonization, land theft, failure by the federal government to honor treaties, and by their nation-to-nation responsibility with Indigenous communities. Lastly, I'll talk about my mother, who is 69 years old. And the way that she makes her living is very much, again, in relation to that communal belief and value that we hold so dearly. She is a community educator, and she does a lot of her work in person. And for the last year, she has been unable to work. And not only has she been unable to perform her professional duties, but she's been unable to perform her duties as an elder in our community, to conduct ceremonies, and to be that asset that we all need in order to be strong, thriving communities. Because we can't carry out all the things that we normally do, coming of age ceremonies, even things where we deal with grief. We have a ceremony that we call the cedar bath, and it's to deal with grief. It's to wash the grief off you. And you have people all around you singing and wiping you down with cedar water. And that's hard to do when we're in a pandemic and we're supposed to stay apart from each other. Boy, 5 minutes does go by really quickly. So I think, when we talk about the monthly stimulus of $2,000, we join in many of the Americans, the majority of Americans who want this. We want that monthly stimulus of $2,000. We demand our sovereignty be honored, treaties be honored, and that we are reflected in the data, and that we are reflected for dignified struggle. And that we are part of the solution, and that we join our relatives all across the US struggling, because it's time for change. It's time to move away from an economy that centers profits and corporations and destructive fossil fuel industries into an economy that centers life, and that cares for all people and the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simone, for sharing the story. I think what really touched me about what you said was the fact that you can't go perform the rituals that in your community you're used to performing when there's loss of life. Part of the hardest part of this pandemic is that it separates us from each other physically, emotionally, spiritually, and it doesn't let us conduct the rituals and the rites that we have in our community to mourn and to grieve. And I think that part of what care and relief looks like to me and my family is that once this pandemic is over and we can gather again in community, I know that our family is going to have a ritual of collective grieving over the loss of elders we've lost in our family and the loss of the time that we've lost together in the last year. And I think it's important that we plan some kind of closure to this chapter, plan some kind of grieving so that we can really start to make ourselves whole again. But thank you, Simone, for sharing your story and your community story. And we had a question in the chat about paid sick leave. Part of the American Rescue Plan was to be 14 weeks of medical leave for 106 million Americans. If a worker got COVID, they would be able to go on medical leave to care for themselves and to isolate. Someone asked if that part was taken out of the plan. It is still in the piece of legislation that passed in the House, but the question is, will legislation be written around it? It's not likely that right now in this moment, the Democrats have support for that kind of robust paid sick leave. But part of that fight is that we have to tell them that without providing people time to care for themselves and to isolate paid so that they don't have to keep forcing themselves to go to work while sick, it's going to continue to perpetuate the pandemic. It's going to continue to spread the virus, and it's going to continue to cost lives. So even though all the news is saying, oh, this is no longer a part of the bill, it is still open to be written into law. And if it's something that you're passionate about, you need to reach out to your elected officials and tell them, we need paid sick leave. This can't be left on the table. It's a key part of healing our community. So thank you for that question. And if you have any more questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll try to answer as many as I can after Patricia's story. So next, we're going to hear from Patricia Mendoza, a leader of ACCE in California, a mom and a tenant activist. She has worked tirelessly in California and at the federal level to strengthen and expand the rights of tenants. And she has personally been deeply impacted by the housing insecurity and economic and emotional upheaval that this pandemic has brought to so many of us. Patricia, welcome, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. And I'm honored to be here, raising my voice again. Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Patricia Mendoza. I'm a member of ACE, the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment. I live in San Diego County in the city of Imperial Beach. I've lived here for over 3 years, 3.5 years. I'm a single mother of 2 that's always worked hard to pay my rent on time and put food on the table for my children. I used to work for a non-emergency medical transportation company. I'm sorry. And due to this pandemic, I lost my job. The last day I worked was March 26th, and on April 5th, I was let go. April 5th, 2020, I was let go. It is extremely difficult because we live paycheck to paycheck. We were already struggling before this pandemic because my pay a month was only $2,000 and 75% of that went straight to my rent. Since this pandemic started, it's been super stressful because I've had 7 asthma attacks since March. And because of my compromised immune system, it's been really hard to find a job. I can't expose myself and risk my life. I'm scared. What if I don't come back to my kids? Who will take care of them? On September 26, 2020, we had a new property owner that came with a 60-day eviction notice for substantial remodeling during a pandemic. I was harassed by this property owner nonstop. She first changed my gas and electric bill to her name. She cut the internet cord from the outside while my kids were doing their online school learning classes. She also shut off my water, but by law, she had to turn that back on. She called the sheriff department on me for trespassing while I was being interviewed here in the yard in my house by the Today Show. She denied the help of $3,000 that the county approved for my rental assistance. I was so scared, worried, and terrified of what was going to happen next. I was scared of becoming homeless and having to tell my children that we will have to live out of a van. That's when I joined ACE, the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment. Since I've joined ACE, I've had the opportunity to share my story in front of local elected officials on a statewide level and even on a national level. I have participated in many protests, many press conferences, and also shared my story on the news and media countless of times. Thanks to ACE, they referred me to legal aid, to a legal aid attorney, and this attorney helped me with my eviction, even though there was an eviction moratorium. Our last day in our home was supposed to be November 30th, and because of ACE, the attorney, and me speaking up and sharing my story and raising my voice, and of course, God, we are still here in the place my children call home. On December 18th, 2020, the owner sold the property, in which she posted on her Instagram comments, and where she stated, don't take a multifamily home. Don't take a multifamily with tenants during a pandemic. It's not normally this stressful, but managed to make well over 6 figures with this little bit of stress. With her little bit of stress and my big stress, all that landlord lady wanted and cared for was money. This is why my fight continues. My fight for canceling rent forgiveness, and mortgages, and to stop all evictions during this pandemic. I continue to fight. I may have won against this owner, but I know a lot of people are still struggling and being harassed and evicted. We all deserve a home to shelter in place during this pandemic, a place to keep our children safe from this virus. No one should have to tell their children that they are being evicted, because evictions equals death. Why is it that we are the first to get hit and the last to get assistance? Why are our Black and brown low-income communities being forgotten? We are hard-working class people, and that just want to keep our families safe. This is why we have to organize, come together in solidarity to demand rent forgiveness, because we simply cannot pay. We have no income, we have no jobs. And when we come together, we are stronger, because there is power in numbers, and we have no choice but to win this fight. This is why I urge you. This is why I urge you today, if you are in need of help with an eviction and or rental assistance, please find help. Find an organization in your community, because there is help. There is plenty of people that do want to help, plenty of organizations. Learn your rights, know your rights, speak your voice. You are not alone. Never, you are not alone. We are in this together. We have not come this far to lose. We're going to continue to fight and win. And remember that when we lose our fear, they lose their power. And we need to continue to fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I know that your story is the story of so many hundreds of thousands of people across this country facing unjust, immoral, unacceptable eviction. And I think that when the landlord saw you, she only saw you, and she didn't realize how many people were ready to stand behind you and fight. And that's the power when we come together in community. When you join an organization like the Frontline and the People's Bailout, we can come together and we can fight problems and people that seem so much bigger than us. It's not true. That landlord is just one person. And Patricia, you have all of us fighting alongside you. And I hope that you find rest and your family, your children can relax and breathe and find rest again. And again, I'm glad that you get to stay in your home. I'm glad they get to stay in the home that they know. And when we're talking about solidarity, we're talking about grassroots organizing, I want to talk about another event that we had earlier today in which organizers all across the country came together to fight on behalf of all of us to get a $2,000 recurring monthly check. So grassroots organizers from Income Movement, Economic Security Project, and the People's Bailout delivered $2,000 past due invoices across the country to 20 members of the Senate. These printed petition invoices had the names of more than 2 million people who signed a change.org petition asking Congress to authorize $2,000 monthly stimulus checks going back to March 2020, and as Patricia said, moving forward. New polling shows that 81% of voters want these checks. This goes beyond party lines. Republicans, 74% are in favor of it. And 60% of voters want these recurring monthly payments to go until the pandemic is over. The President Biden's American Rescue Plan proposes just one single $1,400 checks. But as Patricia pointed out, if you haven't been working since March 2020, that's not going to cut it. It's not going to pay back all of the money that you owe. Now, there are several bills in Congress, including one that was co-sponsored by former Senator and our current Vice President, Kamala Harris, that calls for ongoing checks. But we have to fight for it. And we need to make sure that we push these bills to include recurring checks before they leave committee. Now, here's the call to action. To fight alongside Patricia, Simone, myself, and thousands of other organizations, lawmakers, and organizers, I need you to sign our demand letter. Go to bit.ly/bailout letter, should be on the bottom, bit.ly/bailout letter, or you can text bailout to 79606. Again, that number is 79606, and you text the word bailout. Join the People's Bailout and demand a just COVID relief package. Let's move forward to better, not back to normal.
Wow. How's everybody feeling? I cried. You see my lipstick. I cried my lipstick off. And I just want to start by saying, Patricia, my God, you are so loved. You are held. We see you. I think Desiree made such a great point, right? That landlord saw you. She didn't see the front line. She didn't see your community. She didn't see all the people that love you. And I really want to name that when you said, when we lose our fear, they lose our power, everybody should just internalize and sit with that, right? Like when we lose our fear, they lose their power. And stories like Patricia's become so much more possible and real. And we can do that. We can make these transformations. And then we can shift to an environment where things don't have to be like that if we stick together and we continue to fight. That's why I fight. So thank you, Desiree. Thank you, Reverend Callahan. Thank you, Simone. And thank you, Patricia. That was an incredible amount of emotional labor and sharing and vulnerability. And I'm sure just you sharing that story will move so many people to action. We have to stay on this path. We have to get the care and relief that our families and our people deserve. Please take a moment, please take a moment to sign the people's bailout. That's bailout, text bailout to 79606. Get in line, be one in the number, as my friend Ash says, who stands behind Patricia. If you haven't already and you want to stay with us, because we need you and we need each other, guys and girls and everybody, please text Frontline to 30403 to join the Frontline. We will not abuse the privilege that is access to you, but we are committed to making sure that you stay informed and in the loop. Don't miss the Frontline's mass call next Wednesday. Unity requires accountability, and we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to figure out exactly how to make these people hold these white supremacists accountable. We got a lot of work to do, and we can do it together. And we're doing it. We got to keep on doing it. We can't make sure that they only see us. They have to know that we are all one. We are not individuals. We are one family. We are on the front line, and we're going to get it done together. We're strong, we're powerful, and we're able to get it done. Thank you so much for joining the Frontline. My name is Tiffany again. I'm the campaign director. Stop by and see us. Drop us a tweet. Send us a little note on Instagram. We'd love to connect with you. Good night, everyone.